We are back in the black hole of real estate, and I've gotten a number of questions that have come in, either as comments or direct messages to me, from people looking to sell properties. And they're looking for a little bit of guidance, not only on how to choose the right agent, make a decision about if they want to offer a commission to the buyer's broker, and if so, how much. And then how are they feeling about when offers come in with regard to navigating the transaction from contract to close? Hey, this is your host, Ron Wojciechowski, and today, I just want to give back and answer some of these questions that have been coming in, and there's more than a few. So for today, I want to focus on those that are considering selling a property or in the process of selling a property. Commission has always been negotiable. And the conditions and terms, whether it's flat fee or a percent, have always been negotiable, and I think that's pretty well established right now. So the listing side of it, I think, is something that I think most people can put their grasp pretty easily. It's this other side of the equation, which has always been negotiable and always an option. There's a growing number of people that have asked, do I really need to pay anything to the buyer's brokerage? Do I make any sort of an offering whatsoever? And if so, do I offer a little bit, a lot of it, something in between? Do we play a guessing game with it? It's a really solid question. And I think you have to go a couple layers deep on this. So let's start with, should you offer a commission to the buyer's brokerage? Because that's the number one question. And I'd say it depends. If you feel that you don't want to pay a buyer's broker, then that is your right, and you can negotiate that or just not have one. But what I'm noticing is that not every buyer can pay their buyer agent that fee at closing. And we'll just take a fictitious situation. Let's say that they're a buyer that can qualify for a home loan, may or may not need help with the closing costs, or maybe they got just barely enough money to make the whole thing work, but when you add in the cost of the agent, now they're sunk. They can't move forward. It's probably a bigger number of people than one might imagine. And as a seller, it's like, hey, free money. I'm just going to avoid paying that. I will save money, which means I get more money at closing. Well, you can absolutely save on commission. I think that's pretty easy to spell out. But you may not net the most amount of money at closing by doing that. And if we take into account the pool of buyers that can afford a down payment and maybe the closing costs, but not a commission, being a pretty big segment of people, at the very least, a seller who's not paying a co-broke, compensation for the buyer's brokerage, I think it's safe to say they're shrinking the pool of potential buyers that would look at and entertain the thought of purchasing the home, or that can actually do it. So I think we can almost say it will be well established that the buyer pool will shrink if nothing is offered. And that's okay. If the seller knows that and they're informed of that and they're willing to take upon the sale with that knowledge, one might say risk, then it's okay. That's always been the case. You never had to pay a buyer's brokerage, and it remains the case. But now we go a little bit deeper, and as we think about it, perhaps it was easy to wrap your head around it. There was just one commission paid and the brokers just split it up. But since that day has passed and we can only be facing forward, it's a real question. Because there is a number of information, let's say on the internet, where everything is true and no one is wrong. Hey, the commissions have disappeared. They are gone forever. No more commission to the buyer's agent. Okay, fair. I think the next thing to think about is the unrepresented buyer. how is that handled? See, because you have an agent representing you. You're paying that agent. Perhaps you get an offer from a buyer's agent, asked if you'd be open-minded about paying their side of the commission. I would at least read the offer even if I knew I was never going to pay a commission, I'd still read the offer. Because there is a world where the offer might actually be at or above the list price, and after paying the realtor, the price might make sense. If you were thinking of selling for $400 but would take $375, at least in your mind, that was kind of listed $400, sell for $375. If the offer came in at $400,000 and the commission was, I don't know, 10 or 15 grand, you could actually net more even though you changed your mind about commission and decided to sell and pay a buyer's brokerage commission. That's going to be a reality. There are times where the commission reducing, the seller's net might be higher than other offers are available in the market, or a better net than you're hoping to get. And if there's no other offer out there and you're dead set against paying a commission, would you actually turn down a deal that nets you, let's say, $385 or $390 when you're hoping to get $375 when it's all said and done? And there's literally no other offers out there. It's the only offer on the table. And this one actually nets you what you're looking for, or even a little bit more. See, I think some people who initially are just going to tell you, I just never want to pay a commission to the buyer brokerage, I think some might change their mind. If the money's right and the terms are right, they might change their own mind. I don't think the agent's going to have to do it. What agents are in our role is to present the offer and, give them an idea of what they would net at closing. Not sure it's ever going to be down to the penny, but I think you can get a pretty good ballpark on it within a real small, variance. I think that's a real thing. So suddenly, if an offer comes in and they're asking for a commission, I think some sellers might change their mind. Now, the unrepresented buyer, this poses a whole different situation. Unrepresented, okay, you save the commission, I think. But maybe they're not offering full price. Maybe they're offering $375. Your number, your target number, and they're factoring in, well, I shouldn't have to pay list price because I'm representing myself. That's always been possible. It's absolutely a thing. I don't think anybody's wrong on that. I think that you would likely be able to attempt to negotiate a lower price because there's no commission on the other side. I gotta believe the seller needs to at least be given the information that an unrepresented buyer is going to have to perform their own contract writing and their own inspections, have access to a property. They're not licensed, so it raises issues about access to the property. Is the seller willing to give lockbox codes out to somebody who's not licensed, doesn't carry, the training or perhaps even the insurance, errors and omissions? Who's going to navigate the inspections? Do they have years and years of transactional experience, or are they kind of new to it but thought it'd be fun to do it on their own? Kind of like never really done surgery before, but I sure like to try one. Let's find a patient. Well, maybe it's not that dramatic, but you get the idea. I believe that somebody who's veteran of purchasing their own property without an agent, that's probably going to work the same way. It might not be too bad. But if somebody's never done it before or hasn't done it in 15, 20 years and has not been training on this or has transactional experience, that can absolutely get in the way of a property going from under contract to close. And with the fallout rate such that it is right now, 25, 30, 35%, I got to believe there's more inherent risk to a deal not closing when there's no representation on one of the two sides. I think that's fair. I also know that if you're to speak in the legal field and ask, real estate attorneys, I think what you'd find is, a good portion of lawsuits occur when one or both sides are not represented in a transaction. So I think it's a lot to consider if you're selling a property. Does it make sense to never offer a commission? I would say this. I would be open-minded about it. And if you're not willing to say up front, I will pay this percent or this flat fee to sell my home, you might still be able to just mention, I'd be willing to consider any offer, and let it be at that. Because then you can look through the actual contract amount, learn whether it's cash or if there's financing involved, look at the days of inspections, and yes, you can absolutely look to see what the compensation is. Maybe the compensation for the buyer broker makes sense. It allows you to net the money that you want, and it also allows the buyer to have representation. I think that might be a good path. If the buyer self-represented mentions that they have their own software, they've written the contracts, they've bought hundreds of homes on their own over the last 20 years, that might be comfortable as well. Because commission has always been negotiable. Nothing just changed. But before we rush to say that, okay, I'm not offering any commission, I would think about what it looks like on the other side. There might very well be more problems with unrepresented buyers getting to the closing table. There might not be, but I think it's something, it bears some thinking. Navigation and logistics of getting an unrepresented buyer into homes and through gates and through special lock boxes on the exterior condo buildings and interior units and getting around a building into areas where you need to provide extra keys for storage units and pools and things like that. I don't think there's a shortage of things that a buyer would need to navigate when they're representing themselves. But I do believe there's a lot more to it that the seller might consider as we move forward in this different time. So, to wrap it all up, listen, if you're selling a house, that's great. And if you want to do it on your own, you always could. You still can. You can certainly pay a brokerage to represent you. You could pay them a fee. You could pay them a percent. And you could choose to either allow a buyer broker to be paid by you as well or through the transaction. Nothing's changed right there. It's a couple extra things to think about. And the big what if, we go down a path, whether it's representation or paying commissions. It's a lot to think about. But what I do believe is that we're in an era where choice is a great option for buyers and sellers this market. I'd also say that a track record and 5-star reviews are going to get looked at more and more. And the ability to navigate not only getting the right property at the right terms, at the right price, and the right closing date together. The skill of an agent, super important. But I also know the navigation piece is going to be big moving forward. So, ton to think about. I just want to take a slow roll down the lane. And hopefully, what we're able to do is answer 15 or 20 questions that were really on the top of the pile and a whole bunch more underneath it by just walking it through. And I got to believe that now that we've taken this journey together, that there'll be a few less questions there was, at the start of this episode. Listen, if you got more questions, drop them in there. And as I mentioned, the questions that we're getting right now are going to be the fuel for the content going forward of this podcast, because the questions need answers. And a lot of people, they're just looking for guidance right now, and we're here to provide that for you. All right, this is Ron Wojciechowski for the Black Hole of Real Estate.